Hi, everybody. Who's ready for more CSS Grid? I am. Hi, it's good to see you all again. Hope you all managed to stay cool or stay warm or however is comfortable for you. It is another scorcher here in Vienna, so I am trying to keep cool. Anyway, welcome back. Let's do some more CSS Grid. Before we begin, I would love to check in. Yesterday was a lot. How are we feeling about CSS Grid? Little challenge, only positive things. I'm kidding. Tell me how you're feeling. Oh, Mel's got a lot of questions. Very good. Sinak is asking, Emacs nav work short. Blah. Emacs nav shortcuts work on Mac globally. Apparently, this is a thing, and nobody told me. Oh yeah. Complete side note, and I'm sorry, I get easily excited about terminal stuff. So yeah, a bunch of stuff works. Sinak, are you talking about like what is it? Control A to go to the begin? No, what is it again? Control E to go to the end of a text field. Sorry, I'm a Vim weirdo, but yeah, a bunch of them work. Sorry, I was outside today and I'm noticing some fluff in my hair. Yeah, but that's what I mean, like terminal shortcuts. Oh, there it is. No, kind of teaching time. But yeah, no, a bunch of Emacs shortcuts. I didn't know. Oh yeah, Control A to start, Control E to end, K to kill. K to kill, I didn't know. But yeah, no, a bunch of these. I think they work on Linux as well, but they do not work on Windows, I believe, or at least not on PowerShell. I hate PowerShell, but we're not here to complain. We are here to do nice things. So yes, let's get started. Hi, Mel. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat as we go, or if you want to drop them all now, however you like. In the meantime, let's do some chores. So if you're joining in for the first time, hi, my name's Carmen. Eda, Jess, and I are teaching a free web development bootcamp. Don't worry if this is your first time tuning in. Everything's on YouTube. We've been doing this since, I want to say start of May. No, end of April. Gosh, we've been at this for a while, huh? Anywho, everything's on youtube.com/@badwebsiteclub. Everything's recorded, so catch up there. You can join us on the Free Code Camp's official Discord. If you go to discord.gg capital V, uppercase KVU, lowercase m, uppercase VXA. The schedule is on badwebsite.club /bootcamps/spring-2026. And by joining, you agree to abide by our code of conduct, badwebsite.club /code-of-conduct. If you see anything out of sorts, please let us know. Okay, links. What else we got? How's the time already? Mel's got questions. Let's save them for the end because I do believe we're going to have a shorter session today. Let's hop right in, shall we? Where we last left off is finishing up the min-max function in CSS Grid. Now, I feel like we went rather quickly through it, and I just want to do min-max one more time. Then we'll do grid column and grid row properties, position items on the grid using grid template areas property. Then we'll move on to today's lesson, which really just involves the dev tools, which, now knowing that y'all are working with a nerd like me, we've done plenty of. So that'll be a quick one. Alrighty. So let's go back to min-max. And we're going to very easily breeze through this. As we recall from yesterday, grid template columns allows us to define how many columns and what their respective sizes can be. They can be either relative or absolute. So here, what we're doing is telling it, hey, actually, I want it to be anywhere between 150 and 300 pixels. So it can't get any smaller than 150, and it can't get any bigger than 300. The second column will be a fraction, which means it'll adapt automatically. Oh, that's it, huh? Well, I still want to play with it a little bit. So let's, I am so overwhelmed looking at your questions, Mel. I don't say this in a bad way. I'm saying this in a, oh gosh, way. But we will handle all of them. Okay, so class is grid. Excellent. So we've got a grid here with 4 through 1. That is 4 times 1 FR. Let's do 3. You remember repeats. And you know what? I actually want to change this a little. No, it's good. Questions are good. So 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR, min, max, 100 pixels. No. Yes, 100 pixels. 1 FR. So with min max, we're saying that the third column will always be at least 100 pixels wide. Can't get any smaller than that, but at most it'll be 1 fraction, which means when there's enough size, all columns will be the same. So that's min max. We did that yesterday. Today, I want to move on to grid template rows and grid template columns. So let me go back just a touch. So let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this here, right? We've got a grid with 12 items, and it is a 4x3 grid, right? So each column, of which are 4, will be one fraction, and each row will be 100 pixels high. The rest is some styling. Inside each, we are centering the numbers using grid, which, fun fact, you can totally do. And what we're going to do now is explore how to use grid sizing, grid layout, to determine where each of the items go, and to determine, like, really lay these out however you like. And you're going to learn from this the real difference between grid and Flexbox. Remember, grid, layout first, content second, whereas Flexbox really adapts to its content. So let's find out what happens when we start determining each item's size. So check this out. We will take our first item, so item 1, and we're going to set its grid column sizing. And we're going to say that grid 1, I'll answer your question in a second. Grid item 1 will go from column 1 until column 3. Okay? So watch what happened. By setting grid column from 1 to 3, this will now be as big as 2 columns. So the fourth item, this number 12 item got pushed to the 4th row, because this one takes up 2 columns. If I wanted to take an entire row, I can go from 1 to 5. Now watch what happens when I start doing weird stuff. What if I wanted to go from 2 to 4? Now check this out. It'll start at column 2 and end at column 4. This column no longer gets used. You might be wondering, okay, what if I wanted to? No problem. Now that we know how to use this, you nailed it, Christina. It's because we are only setting the rows to be 100 pixels tall for the first 3 rows. If I do this, now they're all the same size. But back to this. So item 2, grid column 1/2. Now it gets pushed to the second column because it's relative to the first one. However, grid row. Now let's tell it, hey, started row 1. Look at this. Oopsie, let me remove that. Look at this. So because I've explicitly told item 2 to be in the first column and row, it's now here before the 1. So what we're doing here is explicitly telling CSS Grid where to position things and how many from which track to which track to go. Because yes, we could also tell item 1, hey, go from column 2 to 4, and also go from row 2 to 4. Now watch this. You have a drink of water. This one's 2 columns wide from the 2nd to the 4th. This one is 2 rows tall from the 2nd to the 4th. I'm not sure I follow the question, Sinak. So because we're telling item 1 to be in the center, these items will move up to make that space, to fill that space. No. Does the ordering of the items randomly shuffle when we change the column and row width of each item? Does the order well, no, look at the order. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Not random. It is in the order of the DOM. Let me move item 1 to be at the bottom right corner. What's the next previous question? Oh yeah. Yes. It's start inclusive, end inclusive, like a standard range argument. Yes. Thank you. When I made 2 start from row 1, item 3 came up with it. Is that because item 3's position depends on 2 on the cascade hierarchy? I think so. I want to take a moment now everybody let this sink in. I want to address users' questions. Is one better than the other, grid versus Flexbox? No, they are different things for different situations. If you take one thing away from this bootcamp, it's this. Flexbox is for one-dimensional layouts. Grid is for two-dimensional layouts. Flexbox, one way that grows with content. Grid is a matrix of items that you determine where they go. Which is best if I want to do a table / matrix of information where it's important that things don't wrap because I need the X and Y axis to be precise so the data each cell corresponds correctly. Again, your heuristic is going to be, do I need one dimension? Flexbox. If I need my information to grow in one direction, Flexbox. If I need to lay out my information in a grid, a square, a rectangle, a table, a matrix. Well, actually, a table, you want a CSS, HTML table. Different topic. Matrix. Anything that, whenever you start thinking about anything with 2 dimensions, grid. Again, Flexbox, line, grid, 2D. Flexbox 1D, grid, 2D. Yeah. So, Sinak, your question. Is it start and end inclusive? Yes. So it starts here and ends here. De nada, señor, or señora, or señore. Yeah, so it starts here, ends here. Now, if I wanted to not be specific of which one it ends at, but rather how many columns or rows it'll take up, for that we use span. Now look at the difference here. Item 1 will start at column 2 and it'll be 1 column big. It will span 1 column. If I wanted to make it the same as before, it'll span 2 columns. So this here, why am I pointing? Y'all can't see. This is the same as this. Give me a sec. What if we duplicate the starts and ends? Why do you all want to break things? I'm worried, friends. I'm kidding. Watch what's happening. So, starts at 2, ends at 2. Starts at 2, ends at 3. Same thing. So if it doesn't span much, it's like, well, I might as well put it there. Don't recommend doing this. That's how you learn. I know. I'm being facetious. I'm being silly. If you were to use grid to do a table layout, would you lose anything with accessibility? Mel, if you want to do a table, use a table. If you were to use a grid to do a table layout, knowing that tables exist, I would ask, why am I doing that? Remember, semantic HTML is important here. And it's not just blind users. It's also users who are groggy in the morning. So what would get lost is the information that is pertinent to it being a table. If you're asking questions, like, I'm going to be honest, I don't know what exact information, what information is lost. However, I would recommend using a table. What if item 1 is from 1 to 4 and item 2 is from 2 to 4? I mean, only one way to find out, right? Okay, let's start over a little bit. So you're saying, what if item 1 is from 1 to 4? And item 2, grid column, is from 2 to 4. This is not helpful to your question because I'm supposing you were expecting them to be on the same row. However, works in the same row. I know. Let's do it. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm worried that y'all want to make this happen. What did CSS Grid do to you? No, that's not right. 1 to 2. Grid column 1, 2 to, no, sorry. Row, gosh. I have an idea. Opacity 0.5. Yep, just as let me make it a little less opaque. Okay, that's too much. Okay, what's going on here? Maybe it's easier if item 2's background color is cyan. It is not a cascade thing per se. Important. Okay, check it out. So what's happening here is that because this is higher up on the DOM, this gets placed first. So from here until here, we have, no, is it 1 to 4? Pardon me. From here until the end, we have red. We have item 1. Item 2 gets put on top of item 1. I'm sure there's actually a reason to do it. So yeah, that's what happens. But just to go back real quick, I feel like I'm riding a dragon. Not the metaphor I would have used, but I'm very happy for you. Didn't we put 1 to 4, not 1 to 3? We put this. Would the Z index change it? Yes. Let's do it. Z index 4, 3. Yeah, so if we make the Z index higher on item 1, it will completely cover item 2. And Abyss Walker, I don't know what you mean. Sorry. Let's, in the meantime, change this to span. You might be wondering, Carmen, which one's better, span or no span? I would say what I always say, which is no matter what you do, be consistent. So if you're going to use span, stick to span. If you're not going to use span, don't stick to not using span. And it's not because it's the best practice per se, but because it's going to confuse you and make you make mistakes. So stick with one. So that's specifying grid column and grid row. So let's do some Q&A, shall we? I'll make this a little larger. What do grid column and grid row properties specify in a grid layout? Size of the grid container, alignment of the entire grid, the horizontal and vertical placement of grid items, or the size of grid tracks? What do we think? P.S. As said, I'm going to be covering less content today, so please, if there's any questions lingering from yesterday, please do. Let me know. So, where's that enthusiasm I saw yesterday? 3, horizontal and vertical placement of grid items. Thank you. What determines the number of grid lines generated for rows and columns in a grid layout? Grid gap property, grid template rows and grid template columns, auto rows and auto columns, or grid area property? What do we think? Number 2, thank you. And how can you specify the way grid items span across rows or columns in a grid layout? How can you specify the way? Okay. By using grid template property, auto in grid column and grid row, using the span keyword or range like 1 to 3, or by defining the grid gap size. What do we think? Oh, it's warm. Gosh. So, Number 3. Thank you. Let's check our answers. Look good. We'll pat ourselves on the back. Pat, pat. And we'll do the last part of CSS Grid, which is using grid template areas. Now, what's really exciting about grid template areas is that you can also use them as labels to essentially sketch out the layout of your grid. And I think this really helps drive home that that grid is layout first, content second, whereas Flexbox is content first, layout second. Let's take a look here what we have. So our grid template areas, we can see it's a 3x3 grid, 3 rows, each with 3 columns. And we can add labels, which we can come up with for each area. Now, what's important to note here, as you can see, these are separated by spaces, which means if there's more than one word, you want to use dashes to separate the words. So this is one big thing of 3 columns. This is one row with 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns, and this one's made up of 3 columns. Now, let's see this in practice. I'm going to copy this over to the HTML editor. And we're first going to examine the markup itself. So we have a grid container with a div with the class set to header, sidebar left class, a main div class set to main, div class sidebar right, and one called footer. Now, because none of the CSS is written here, they are just a bunch of H2s, one on top of the other, which we would expect. However, let's use our grid and those template areas to define how it looks. And we're going to start with this part here, right? Grid template areas, header, 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 sidebar, main, sidebar, footer, footer, footer. We're going to start with that. Just going to copy that in. And we don't expect much to change here. We have a grid, right? It's inferring that there's 3x3 going on here from our grid template areas and laying them out accordingly, right? There's a header, left sidebar, main content, right sidebar, and footer. What I'm going to do next is for each of these, bring them in one by one. So for the header, we have a new property called grid area. And this grid area, notice there's no quote marks here, is going to match the label from the grid template areas. So we're saying, hey, this div, this part of the grid corresponds to this part of the grid. This item header, which we match using the class, its grid area corresponds to the header. So it's taking up, and hey, don't take my word for it. Where are my dev tools? Check it out, check it out, check it out. 1, 2, 3 columns. Neat. Let's bring in the next one. I'm going to do the sidebar areas at the same time. Sidebars and main. So, and So, sidebar. Okay, hold on. I want to answer Christina's question first. I'm wondering why the H2 is centered in the middle of the 3 columns that the header takes up. Is it because it's the only item in that class? Christina, look at this HTML here. Sorry, CSS. Text align is sent to center. Remove it. Gone. If we're anyway going to use a whole row for one label, isn't it the same as using one label in the row instead of 3 same labels? You mean doing this? This seems cursed. No. No, don't do that. It needs to span 3 columns. Okay, now I'm going to bring this back. Cool. So, sidebar left. Why is it not the same? Because you're not specifying the spam. Spam? You're not specifying the span. How many columns it takes up. Sidebar left. Grid area is set to sidebar left. Main, grid area main, sidebar right, grid area sidebar right. So boom, boom, boom. You know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to write the footer by hand based on pattern matching, which, by the way, is our #1 skill as software developers. We recognize patterns. True story. Our grid area, we will set to footer. Huh? It is footer, right? Can I not spell? Why is it not doing the cool thing? Oh, because I have... That's embarrassing. That's because I still haven't done background color. Let's do it. Let's make it cyan, slightly different. Padding is 20 pixels. Text align. You know what? Let's do it right because we can. Why not? Cool. You want to see something wild, by the way? Because we have used CSS Grid to build a very, very specific layout using this grid areas, watch what happens when I change the order of the markup. I'm going to put the main at the bottom. And I'm going to put sidebar left before sidebar, after footer. Y'all like breaking stuff, right? So now my markup is completely different. Sidebar right, then footer, then sidebar left, then header, and then main. But notice that the layout in the grid looks exactly the same. Why? This is because we are using the grid template areas to tell it specifically what it should look like. However, why is this not a good idea? Why is it not a good idea to rely on the grid as the single source of truth of the order in the DOM? Question for the group. Accessible HTML. Love the enthusiasm. Gonna need more details. Order. Can you elaborate, please? Because it changes. What do you mean, Mel? Y'all are on the right track, but I really need like a full sentence answer here. I'm being pedantic. It changes the order of the HTML and what the accessibility tree comes to first. That's correct. So to you and me, looking at this through the viewport, we're seeing header first, sidebar, main content, etc., etc. However, a screen reader, for example, is going to read the sidebar first, then the footer, then the other sidebar, then the header, and then the main. Okay, so the grid is good for doing the layout, But if we want to keep it the same, we need to respect the DOM. When you add or remove elements, the grid changes like removing main content element from HTML. Yeah, totally. Thank you all. Okay. But also from a development standpoint, you expect things in a logical order. There you go. Okay. Questions. How do you design a grid layout? Wait. No, we'll do Q&A first. Okay. Timing. This confuses me. If shuffling things in HTML grid stays the same due to the CSS grid, then why did the order of appearance change when you tried putting one label in a row for my earlier question? Because we were using, for the grid template areas, we are specifying where in the grid they go. This is just an added ability of CSS Grid. And as Mel correctly said, this can be a good thing because you can lay out the HTML for a screen reader, then place elements wherever you like for visual users. Correct. Anyway, questions. How do we design a grid layout? Comma separated values like 1, 4. Header and footer. Oh, comma radius. Let me try that again. Comma separated values like header and footer, with strings of space separated values to represent the different rows and columns for the layout, or with space separated values like 2FR, 1FR, etc. Number 3, thank you. Which property do you use the grid template areas property in combination with? Grid column, grid row, grid gap, grid area. What do we think? What do we think? Grid area, thank you. What is the specific use case of the grid area property? To specify an area of the grid to exclude, specify the size of grid items, to place individual grid items by specifying row and column positions, or to create a visual representation of the grid. What do we think? I'm excited to do the Q&A after this. Place individual items by specifying grid and column positions. Thank you both. And yep, we did it. Pat. Folks, we are done with day 1 of CSS Grid. For day 2, we're going to cover very briefly the DevTools inspection tool. And CSS validators. So is it this one here? Nope. Is it this? Yes. So we've actually been doing a ton of this throughout this bootcamp. I usually like to bring up my DevTools by right-clicking on the element I want to inspect, going to Developer Tools and then Inspect. But there are keyboard shortcuts, and honestly, since this doesn't have much to do with CSS Grid, I want to do this Q&A myself while we follow a little bit. So what is the primary advantage of using browser dev tools for CSS debugging? I think it is the fact that it allows real-time inspection and modification of CSS. Which of the following is not a typical feature of CSS validators? Checking CSS against official specifications, reporting syntax errors, providing suggestions for improving CSS performance, or identifying missing semicolons. I think it's this, providing suggestions for improving CSS performance. How can the device emulation feature in DevTools assist in CSS debugging? Adjust your CSS for all devices, how it looks like on different screen sizes and devices. We actually did this as well. create separate CSS files, or optimizes images. Number 2. Check our answers, and we're done. Pat, pat. That said, let's go to Mel's Q&A. Is it more common to use Grid for desktop layouts and Flex for mobile layouts? No. On the contrary, you might need one-dimensional layouts in desktop, and you'll need two-dimensional layouts for mobile. So I really would strongly recommend thinking of them as two very different things, that you're not choosing one over the other. You're rather asking yourself, do I need a one-dimensional layout or a two-dimensional layout? That's it. When naming grid areas, is it okay to use 2 to 5 letters to make it easier to see the layout in the code and add comments for what they stand for? Example, head instead of header, SBR instead of right sidebar. This is going to differ from person to person. I do not want to sit here and say it depends. However, because this comment was split in two, like this, I'm going to tell you what happened to me as I read your comment, Mel. I didn't have the slightest clue what SBR stood for. So the rule I try to live by is I'm going to assume that I'm not going to remember anything that's in my head in 6 months. So let me put it this way. If you come back in let me rephrase that again. When you're coming up with stuff like this, try to think of what happens if someone gives you a code base that you've never looked at before and it has stuff like this. You might be able to infer what it means, but it might not be easy to follow. I'm a fan of verbosity within reason. However, you might have heard that one of the most difficult things in computer science is naming. So my recommendation is, head instead of header. I mean, if you really need those 2 characters, go for it. But right sidebar, if you really want to cut down right sidebar, why not sidebar R and sidebar L? Like a little context helps. It's like naming a variable X, right? What does it mean? Do grids not respect the size of elements, acting more like position absolute? For example, when you place multiple items in the same grid area, they overlap one another instead of making room for other elements in the area. Yes. We talked about this yesterday as well. Let me really drive this home. With a grid, it's layout first, content second. I mean, look, let me bring this in. So let's defy the heavens. Header, no, not header, main content. Look at what happened. I've made main content position absolute. Top is 10 EM. And left, is it left, I think? 10 EM. Notice what happened to the sizing. If you want, here's my recommendation. If you want to have the content dictate sizing and stuff. Oh, was it hidden? Oh my gosh, it was. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Christina. It was hidden. I wrote position absolute, top and left. I just highlighted it there. If you really want to be messing with the sizes, I think it's time to reconsider grid. Could you use grid to draw CSS art? Yes, In fact, a little bird tells me that y'all and Jess are going to be drawing some kind of bird. Yes. When using grid template area if the elements are in the correct order in the HTML, the elements are evenly spaced as if grid template column was used instead. Why don't the elements go into the areas and span as grid template area as define the areas? When using grid template area, if the elements are in the correct order in the HTML, the elements are evenly spaced as if. Why don't the elements go into the areas and span as grid template area has defined the areas? In the order. I don't think I follow the question. I'm sorry. Are you saying if I remove all of this CSS, why doesn't it follow the grid template area? Because the labels are missing in those, the grid area properties are missing. Did I understand the question correctly? I'll move on to the next one for the time being. Oh, if you delete all the grid area properties on the items. Yeah, okay, cool. So I think I did understand the question. Why don't they follow? I don't know. It might be a question for the CSS designers, the people who come up with the CSS standard. Sorry, sometimes I don't have answers for that. It just may, I think it's good. I think it's safe to say it expects you to use those grid areas. You'd expect the top still. I mean, we can expect a lot of things, Mel. I'm sorry. I know that's not very helpful. I'm going to move on to the next one. Is grid template area like a wrapper for grid template columns, grid template rows? Calling grid template columns rows to create the grid for you, then setting the spans based on the array of areas when an item is added. For example, grid template area A1, A1, A2. For A1, for A2, grid area 1314. Yeah, I think so. I think I understand the question. It is, think of it as a way to write very specific columns and rows with labels. One is not better than the other. Your mileage may vary. So for me, for example, I find it nicer to read a little bit of labels as opposed to 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 4. I think I have an answer for question 6. All right, let's see. Is there a way to use grid template areas with min-max to prevent empty grid areas shrinking so you can have lots of elements surrounding one empty area? I don't know about using grid template areas, but, or can we? What do you got? Min to surround an empty area, use grid template columns and grid template rows to define the grid, and then use grid column to move the middle element. Yeah. Good call. Let's try that. Let's remove everything except for main. There it is in the center. Is that what you meant? Let me know. How do you create this layout? Sorry, I'm not upset, I promise. This is my head just collapsing. How do you create this layout? Row A, 3 columns. Row B, 2 columns. Row C, 3 columns. Would you need multiple grid containers, or is there a way to do it using grid template areas? I don't know about grid template areas, but what comes to... I mean, I would do it with fractions? Hang on. Hang on. I don't want to use grid template areas. This sounds like a job for this. No. Oh, I see. Huh. I bet there's a way to do it. Let me think. Actually, I take it back. I take it back. You're absolutely right, Mel. We can do it with grid template areas. Hang on, where's your question again? Would you need multiple grid containers? Is there a way to do it using grid template areas? Okay, so where's my HTML? So you want 3 columns, row B, 2 columns, row C, 3 columns. Why not hack it? Check this out. Okay. Hang on. So you want row A to have 3 columns, row B to have 2 columns. So let's cheat. Because to the user, it doesn't matter how many columns there are. So why not make each row and do the, what's that called? The lowest common denominator? No, highest common denominator, whatever, 6. Hear me out. I feel so smart right now. So sidebar. So sidebar left, sidebar left, sidebar left, sidebar right. Did I do that right? Oh, main is missing. Hang on, we don't need main. Forget main. Is this what you meant, Mel? In a sense. I would argue yes. Neat. Cool. When an area doesn't have any elements, the gap property still treats it as a column so it doesn't collapse down, causing the gap between elements to be twice as large. When an area... is there a method for collapsing the gap? I know you could use negative margin on elements, but that feels very messy. Let me read the question again. I think I did. Oh. How? With my solution. Oh, cool. Nice. I believe you. Is that all the questions then? Oh my gosh. We actually did it, y'all. In that case, yes. Let's look at what's left. So for today, actually, couple things. Number 1, CSS Tricks Grid. So CSS Tricks not only has a fantastic guide for Flexbox, they also have a fantastic guide for Grid, which I highly recommend. There we go. Highly recommend using this. I just posted it in the chat. It's a reference. It's a good thing to come back to every now and then. And Etta beat me to it. CSSGridGarden.com. Let's go there. CSSGridGarden.com. Fun little game for learning CSS Grid. Highly recommend. And I think that leaves you with the quiz, product landing page, design a newspaper layout. And for tomorrow, we'll be doing animations and accessibility. It's going to be fun. I recommend it highly. I think that's everything for today, friends. Well done. CSS Grid is hard. But if you take anything away today, just remember, 1 dimension, content prioritized, Flexbox. 2 dimensions, layout prioritized, Grid. And you might sometimes use one where you should use the other. But yeah, that's all for today, my friends. Oh, I love animations as well. Well, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I'm going to go melt in the heat. I wish you all the most wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.